Welcome, welcome, welcome. The Inside Bassmaster Podcast is back, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company, episode 135. I'm your host, as always, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, like usual, Kyle, Jessie, and Kyle. It's the beginning of the month, so it is time for our Pattern of the Month episode. And for the month of July, we thought no better person as we head to smallmouth country for the second part of the Bassmaster Elite Series Season 2. Have Mr. Seth Feider. Seth, appreciate you joining us. And Kyle, it should be a great one today with one of the best smallmouth and up north anglers. No matter what any rankings that come out say, one of the best anglers in the world.
Yeah, no question. I mean, you walk outside right now in Alabama or in Arkansas, because it's just there, and it makes you realize why we go north this time of year, because it is blatantly miserable down here. And who better to have on the podcast than Mr. Seth Feider to talk some smallmouth fishing? And I do have to tell on Seth. I think Seth was the first person to give us a hard time about not having him on the pod yet. So here he is. He's on the podcast right now.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You had 134 other guests before me. I mean, I didn't think I was that far down in on the list of bass fishermen, but you guys must be going off them bass fan rankings or something.
That's what I was alluding to. We had to get to all the high names up there that have obviously somehow, it doesn't make any kind of sense no matter what their unbiased claim is. And they can call me. I don't really care. I'm 30. I'm a grown man, like Mike Gundy would say. But Seth, you're exactly right. It's been a little while. We haven't had you on the podcast to this point, but we know we're going to have you on a winner's circle one at some point, maybe with this year's smallmouth swing. I mean, the odds of a Champlain possibility are there, no doubt. And then you've already won at St. Clair and you've been close at St. Lawrence. So, I mean, you could just go 3 in a row here, but that's the one thing when we get, we've had a lot of spawning pattern of the months. We've had a lot of top water types of things. But when we get to July, August, September, we really start thinking a lot of smallmouth. So I always ask this question first to our anglers on, what's the first thing you think about when going fishing, targeting smallmouth, when you hit the month of July? Where's your mind at in the whole scheme of things?
July is kind of a weird month. You can kind of do about everything you want. There's going to be some fish that stay shallow. Once you get into like August, you're pretty much looking at exclusively deep water fishing smallies. But July, you got fish kind of doing a little bit of everything. And honestly, I prefer to fish them shallow, like not bed fishing, but sight fish them up shallow. So that's what I gravitate to, as long as you got the right weather conditions for it. But tournaments can be equally as one. Fishing out deep, you got a lot of fish starting to come out, and it's kind of that time of year where you can do a little bit of everything. It's kind of like May fishing largemouth down south. It's post spawn, but you got some fish up shallow on the bank, on the docks. You got fish starting to go out to the brush and the ledges and stuff. It's kind of the same deal, but for smallmouth.
You kind of alluded to it there. One thing that I've always felt is super unique when we go up north and smallmouth fish is the group of fish that you were talking about, the ones that aren't necessarily spawning, but they stay shallow. It seems like no matter where we go, St. Lawrence, any of the northern smallmouth fisheries, there's fish doing that. Like, what keeps them shallow? Like, obviously you take a southern largemouth and things like shade, cover, those kind of things are going to keep them shallow. Like, what is it that keeps those fish shallow? And, what are they doing up there, I guess, is the main question.
It's food. They're feeding. They're sight feeders. So especially if you got clear water, they like being up shallow. And then, our water temperatures aren't, we're not in the 90s. You're probably looking at, mid low 70 water temps. There's no real need for them to escape the heat. There's a lot of food up there, and they can see really good up there, and they're pretty much sight feeders. So I don't know exactly what it is that keeps them up there, but they definitely there's enough for them to be there for sure.
We've seen you on the Elite Series catch them shallow, not bed fishing, but sight fishing, like you said, at the St. Lawrence River and places like that. There's really shallow places sometimes at Champlain that you guys get into and do that stuff as well. But for Minnesota, is that still play out that way? There's you guys have a ton of lakes. Some of them are big round bowls, natural, all those deals. But then some of them, I guess they do have some some real shallow areas, some where you're, half a mile and it's the same depth, and then all of a sudden it drops out deep. So how do you go about breaking down what point shallow? Because it's not just like the South where, oh, as soon as you get to the end of a dock, that's shallow. It could be a long ways, and the docks that are up there are there's no fish all the way up there because they're 2 miles out in the same depth zone.
Yeah, I'd say shallow's like less than 10 foot. I mean, it's going to be where I can see the bottom, If I'm in a lake where I can see 5 feet down, that's shallow. If I'm in a place where I can see 15 feet down, that's shallow. Basically, wherever I can see the bottom I'd call it shallow for smallmouth.
That's good.
It's kind of, a big range, but, I'm going to be able to like go by them and see them. And another thing I like about that, I can target specific fish. If there's, a few 3-pounders and 1 5-pounder, I can try to catch that 5-pounder, which you can't really do out deep. And then in practice, I can get a real, you go out deep and you see a school of fish or whatever, you catch one, it's a 3-pounder or whatever. You don't really know what's down there, There might be 15 3-pounders or, 2 5s and a dozen 3-pounders or whatever. But up shallow, I can really manage my fish for a multi-day tournament because I know what's there, There's 2 4-pounders, a 5-pounder, a few 3-pounders. I know exactly what I'm dealing with.
And typically, like I was just thinking about this, when you're talking about knowing what's there, are they similar? Obviously they're not bed fish because they're not sticking on one thing, but how reliable is that? Like, you pull up, days later and you can count on those fish being there? Like, they typically stay in kind of the same area?
Yeah, if you got the right weather, yeah, it's got to be, you need sun for sure, and the calmer the better. I mean, calm and sunny they're sight feeders. That's when they want to be up there. If you get a cloudy, rainy, nasty, windy day, I would not fish shallow smallmouth at all. But if I have the right conditions, yeah, there's a lot of the stuff looks the same, but there's something that's holding them in that area. They might be 50 yards away or whatever, but you're dealing with clear water and fish you can see. If it's not like they're 50 yards away out deep, you'll never know they're there, but up shallow I can find them again.
Sure.
And they're not massive schools. There might be 5 or 2 or 10 fish up there. It's not going to be a 200 fish spot, but if you find enough of those, you can make them work.
That's what I was going to ask next. Was you're talking about shallow being places you could see the bottom. Obviously, some people, that's going to be different for everybody because of their good eyesight or the sunglasses they wear, or just knowing you didn't see a fish, but you saw a dark spot, and that's that bass just sitting there camouflaged and it moved its tail once you saw it. So are you really reliant early in the parts of June on your sunglasses or on your forward facing sonar and things like that to stay stealthy and stay away from them, but also you kind of got to get close enough to see the size at times too?
Yeah, for sure. In pre-fish, I'll run right through them. I don't care to catch one. I just want to get a look at them. Then when I come, I'll put a waypoint right where they are, and then typically when I'm coming back, I'll just move my cursor to my waypoint. It'll tell me how many feet away I am from it, and I'll start out long casting to them, and hopefully catch some that way, and then kind of ease my way in there and start targeting specific fish.
Typically we get into bait talk when you talk about the pattern of the month. We usually talk about top 3 baits. We'll split it up maybe for largemouth fishing and for smallmouth fishing. But I wanted to get more specific with something that obviously you've had a lot of success with, and a lot of guys have branched on, or I guess hopped on the bandwagon, is the fighter fly. So like your hair jig. Explain to me this, kind of the history of that bait, how that was even figured out that was such a thing. Because I can remember, for me personally at least, like I remember seeing guys throw that early on and thought, like, who figured this out? Like who figured this deal out? And then obviously for you, promote your own thing. But a lot of guys throw that bait. That's not something you throw. I mean, if you go to any Elite Series guy boat during the Northern Swing, they're gonna have that exact bait in the boat. So kind of give me a rundown of that bait, what makes it effective, the history of it, and then kind of your setup and places you would throw it, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, anytime I'm fishing shallow smallmouth, I'll have it tied on. It does seem to taper off. Like September, I wouldn't have it tied on. August, probably not. May, June, July is the time of year to throw it when they're shallow. What it imitates, I don't know. Maybe a leech. I don't even know if the smallmouth know, but it's just something that it's a bait that has like no negative cues to it. It's never, you know, some stuff you throw at fish they'll run away from. You know, I never see that with a hair jig. There's no twitching. It's just so smooth gliding through the water. And I think it's really just a curiosity thing more than anything. They just kind of slow rolls over the top of them. They kind of come up, take a look at it, track it for a little bit, and take a little nip at it. You got them. But there's not much to it. I mean, unless you do it at the mower, it's just a slow. It's a lot like fishing a little kitech or something. You know, a small swim bait. It's just a slow, steady retrieve. Off the bottom. You know, you want it like halfway through the water column, closer to the top maybe. But it definitely shines anytime. The clearer the water, the better, and then the shallower, the better as well. But as far as the history of it goes, Jeff Gustafson's the one that showed it to me, probably 2010-ish, at the Sturgeon Bay Open. It's a big smallmouth tournament in Wisconsin, team tournament. You'd really have to ask him on the origins. That's something they'd been throwing for quite some time in Canada. That wasn't anything new. Kind of a top secret little deal. I don't know how it got started. If it was started out as a crappie jig that they ended up catching a bunch of smallmouths on, or what the deal was. But yeah, you'll have to have Gussie on to get the real origins of it. But it's for sure Canadian. They've for sure been doing it for a really long time. And yeah, I've found out probably 2010-ish, and then took it to Minnesota, and it worked really, really well there. And then yeah, everywhere I've been that has smallmouth on it. Actually, that tournament we fished out at Havasu, I caught every one of them on it out there, and you could tell they'd never seen it before. But yeah, like I said, have Gussie on, he'll give you the real origins, but that's as far back as it goes for me, is 2010 Sturgeon Bay Open.
Well, he's been in studio before, and we've talked about it, and he calls it an after dinner mint. Just something that's like, you don't want a full-blown dessert, but it's just something that's just, you know, you need a little bit more. And so the smallmouth like it, like you said, Seth, it's non-intrusive. It's not something that's going to be just too in their face. There are a couple aspects to it, though. We're from the South. I know the answer to this just because we've talked about it before, but we throw hair jigs in the South, and those suckers are half, 3/4, or 1 ounce hair jigs, and it's a little bit different than that hair jig. So give me your sizes. I know there's a couple colors that you lean in on more. There's one that's, you know, definite, but then there's some other times that you might have other colors. And then one thing that I think have talked to me about that's important is your rod action, to be able to throw such a light bait. So yeah, size, a couple colors, and when or why, and then that rod action, which is huge.
Okay. Honestly, the biggest thing is the line you use for casting. It's all braid. I see some guys try to throw it on like straight light fluoro, but you can't get the distance with it. And that's kind of the key when you're fishing shallow smallmouths, is the further you can throw, the more you'll catch, plain and simple. So I go really light braid, and I use like Suffix 832 is a braid I use for like every spinning rod I own except my hair jig rod. They make a nano braid. I used to use a long time ago that Berkeley nano fill, but like super, super light. Both those, the ones I throw, are like, they call them 8-pound tests, but they're like probably half the diameter of like your standard 8-pound braid when you go into those micro lines. But that's the biggest thing. And having a big spinning reel, like a 4,000 size spool. The bigger the spool and the lighter the braid, the more casting distance you get. And then I throw it on a 7/6 medium light spinning rod. The length also helps with the casting distance, and then that real light action is really key to being able to get that bait out. It's basically a glorified crappie jig with a little bit better hook in it, you know. The size I throw is 3/32 almost all the time. I really need to start experimenting more with some bigger sizes out deeper, but I haven't gone down that road yet. But for shallow, 3/32 the size, and then 9 times out of 10, black is the color. I think it just silhouettes the best. You know, this bait, you know, there's no vibration or noise or anything dramatic about it. So I think that black color really shows up good, and, you know, as a silhouette as they're looking up at it in the clear water. And then when there is like a active mayfly hatch where you're seeing smallies eating mayflies off the top, we make a color called damsel green. It's kind of a real light watermelon color, kind of a yellowish watermelon color. And when they're actively eating mayflies, I'll go to that color. I've seen that be better than black, but that's the only time I've seen black. Something better than black is when they're super like keyed in on mayflies.
I can't help but look and see that there's more colors than, of course, just black and that color you're mentioning. I'm thinking about getting some white ones and throwing them at schooling fish, because the schooling fish down here don't bite anything. You can't get them to you can't force them into biting. So that might be something worth trying down here. Now, you obviously kind of mentioned it a moment ago, but now I think for somebody like myself, or somebody, you know, that has not fished this technique up north, you're saying that, I mean, it's pretty much like a steady retrieve back. Like, you're not necessarily putting any action into it with your rod. You're just basically slow winding it back.
Yeah, just like a little swim bait. More like if you try to twitch it or kill it, that's when the fish turn off from it. It's just that slow, steady. It's kind of like a spy bait too. Just that slow, steady, confident swim through the water, and that's what gets them. And going back to colors, there are some, you know, a lot of the Tennessee guys I've heard do real well. You know, obviously they're fishing shad fish and stuff like that. They do really well on the white fighter flies, but you know, when you get up north, it's, you know, that's not really their forage base. So I think that kind of goes away. I'm sure you could still catch some on it, but I do know the guys like the Tennessee smallmouth guys do well on the white and the shad colors.
Before we move on from the fly, I got to ask you, during the Northern Swing tournaments, how often do you have guys asking you for some flies that don't have any?
Every tournament we go to, but I can't stand tying them, so usually my answer is no.
That's a
I need
great
to
way
get
to
like a
finish.
big bag of them packaged up for everyone else, but no, I usually tie my own, and I like can't stand tying them. Like I'll tie about 6 for the whole year and just be done with it. And anyone else that wants one, it's a no.
That's a great way to pre-fish, Kyle. You go practice all the other ways, and if people keep asking you for it, you know that there's a bite somewhere, they broke off on it. Now you know I'm going to use them now. I'm going to decide to figure that out. Seth, Kyle asked you about the fly. There's obviously other baits that have been great for smallmouth that are also in your arsenal. When you are up shallow, 10 feet less, the fly is one. Is it the standard traditional baits that we see that catch them out to 40, 50 feet that still are going to be your go-tos 10 feet or less? Or do you kind of get to mix in a couple other maybe baits that we would throw down south more frequently, like a spinnerbait or a topwater?
Yeah, there's a couple of chatterbait is a real good bait too. I catch a lot of them on a fluke. Jerk bait, but as far as like the bottom stuff goes, and even those shallow fish, even though they're not spawning, they are kind of, every one of them's got his own attitude. You know, if there's 5 up there, you're probably gonna need at least 3 baits to catch all 5 of them, if not five different baits, because each one's kind of got his own. You know, I'll have a lot of rods rigged up. I'll have a little tiny tube rigged up. I'll have like a Z-Man turd Ned rig set up, a short light drop shot set up, the fluke, the chatterbait, hair jig, obviously, probably a wacky worm as well, and then a jerk bait, a hard jerk bait. I'll have all those tied up, and I'll catch fish on every one of them every day of the tournament. And like I said, each one's kind of got his own, you know, attitude, or you know, you'll catch one on one, and the next one will want something else. But when you're chasing them around, you can kind of see how they act. And I usually typically start out with like the chatterbait or the fluke, just because I throw it on big heavy line. I can make a long cast with it. And it seems like anytime there's a group of shallow smallmouths, like one of them's going to be the fired up. He's going to bite anything you throw in there. You know what I mean? So I like to get him on a big hook, heavy line, boat flip him, and then I'll kind of work my way down lighter and smaller stuff, trying to get the rest of them. But yeah, it seems like anytime there's a group, especially if you can sneak up on them, like first cast, he'll probably bite anything. So I want it on 20-pound line and a big hook. I'm just going to reel them in a boat, flip them, and then, you know, when the dust settles, then we can pick up the spinning pole and do the Takumi Ito and chase him around the boat for 5 minutes. Hope he doesn't break our line.
I gotta follow up on that, Kyle. He mentioned all those shallow baits, and you held the hard jerk bait for the last selection. That's something that I'm interested in because I've seen guys like Hank Cherry tell the stories about having just giant bags of fish come off on that jerk bait. So someone who lives up and fishes for smallmouth every day that they're available to up north, is there a secret to the sauce on how to hook and land some of these jerk bait smallmouth that seem like that's the last thing I want on them? It seems like they're going to jump off that more than anything. So is there a way that you have kind of found experimenting to have a higher hookup and land ratio with a hard jerk bait and a couple trebles?
It's my last resort. When I say jerk bait, like on my first cast, I'm talking like a fluke.
Yeah, for sure.
But like a hard jerk bait, it's probably my last resort. It's a good pre-fish bait, and obviously it catches fish, and there's times of year it's better than anything else. But honestly, like on those shallow fish, I'll use it more last resort. Sometimes there'll be like a rock or a little patch of grass that they just like will not get away from no matter what you can do. And sometimes if you like snap a jerk bait really hard, really fast, right in front of them, they'll just react to it and come out and kiss. Like I've caught a couple on the St. Lawrence where like, I'd pitch a tube or a hair jig and then just let it drift by them and nothing. But they were like kind of glued to a rock. They weren't spawning, it's middle of summer. But I'd rip a jerk bait right in front of them real hard and fast, and they'll kind of come out and just take a nip at it, and that's enough to hook them on a jerk bait. And a really light rod helps. Like the rod I throw is a medium light for jerking smallies, and then really good treble hooks helps. But I mean, honestly, if you can get 2-3 sets in them, that's your best chance. If you got one little one in the corner of the mouth or on the edge of the lip, your odds aren't good. But that's just something you got to deal with jerkbait fishing. You're not gonna, you need to get more than 5 bites jerkbait fishing to catch them. You know what I mean? It's kind of like punching or something. It's just, you're not gonna win a tournament getting 5 bites a day punching. It's just not gonna happen. You're eventually gonna lose one.
I mean, I feel like that's a pretty good transition to get into the second part of kind of what we were going to talk about a little bit. You've been outspoken over the years about, especially early in your career, people just assumed you were just a smallmouth guy. But like the reality of it is that Lake Minnetonka is your favorite lake, and you like grass flipping, like complete polar opposite of what, most people just naturally associated you with early on. Something Ronnie and I were talking about before we got on here was, this time of year in July, what does the stage of the grass look like up in that part of the world? Have they got into it yet? Kind of where are we at in that process in July?
That our lakes have changed a lot over the last few years. That's kind of a weighted question. There are definitely lakes that are like full topped out, beautiful milfoil, but a couple of things have happened. We've gotten zebra mussels in a lot of our lakes, which made our lake's a lot clearer, which really shouldn't hurt the grass at all. But what it did is a lot of coontails grown out. A lot, the milfoil kind of used to be our outside edge, somewhere in 10 to 14 feet of water. Now we have coontail growing out from 15 to 22, 24 feet of water, which shouldn't be an issue, but they've gone so hard on spraying the grass around here. It's really rare to find a good milfoil flipping bite in Minnesota anymore. The last few years, it's been very difficult. They've pretty much nuked all our lakes on the extinction, I think. Like, I don't even think we're really going to have much more for milfoil, to be honest with you, in the next few years. So a lot of those fish have gone to coontail, and that's like a whole different deal. That's all like Ned rigging and drop shot and spin and pull stuff. Because coontail is different. They don't actually get in it like they do milfoil. Like milfoil, they live in it. Coontail's more clumpy, and they kind of just live around it, So it's all like spinning rod stuff. But there are some good milfoil bites to still be had. But it's it used to be every lake, and now it's pretty rare to find a good one. But in July, your grass is going to be pretty close to being full grown. It'll still grow into August, but in a normal place, you'd have milfoil up to the surface, everything except for the coontail up to the surface, matted up, thick as can be. And I don't know who's in charge of that, the DNR or what, but they've they've done a number on our grass up here, and it's really like Minnetonka is the shell of what it used to be. The weights suck out there now, and nobody catches them flipping milfoil anymore. I'm glad I got to experience the glory days, but yeah, it's just not what it used to be. And now everything's moved to the coontail because of the clear water, and then obviously there's not much left for milfoil. So kind of a sad day, but yeah, the fish are adjusting, and it's just a totally different deal. I wish it was all milfoil. That's my favorite thing to fish, but it's kind of turned into like I said, a Ned rig drop shot deal, a lot deeper. Kind of fishing more isolated clumps than you would, big giant lines of milfoil like we used to fish.
Well, I can hear the sadness in your voice.
Yeah,
that makes me sad.
Yeah,
it's depressing.
It makes me want to. Dude, I got this little lake by my house. Like they always leave it alone. Like you can't. There's no boat traffic on it, no houses. It's just a little tiny pond, and like I went there. I take my dad there every year. We go there and beat on him pretty good. It's probably got the most beautiful milfoil you've ever seen in it. We get out there and troll all the way over there, and there's like orange signs all over on the bank. They like sprayed this lake that nobody like. I mean, it's a trolling motor only. Like you cannot wakeboard or jet ski or anything like that on it. There's not a house on it. I mean, for no reason, they sprayed all the grass in it. And yeah, I pretty much wanted to cry when I left there. It's usually a place me and my dad will go catch, We usually find 3-4 good schools, catch 50, 60 nice bass in a day. We went out there and caught like 3, and all the grass was gone. And yeah, it was a sad day.
I just don't understand that. I mean, I know we could probably get into this and we could talk about it forever, but like that's the thing, like you mentioned, on lakes where boat traffic and people don't really exist. Like I don't know why it matters. Like I don't know what's the benefit in doing that. Like
well,
I don't know
about
if
to
we
get
need
knocked down in like a month and a half when the winter like it's gonna take itself out. I don't understand.
Right.
It's invasive, Kyle. It's from Eurasia. It's ruining everything. Yeah, that's the thing I never understood. They call it invasive, but just because it's invasive doesn't mean it's bad. Like it's literally better than any grass we have naturally growing in any of our lakes. Like, but because it's invasive, we have to kill it all. It's like we could have that or broadleaf cabbage, which is like not good for anything, but it's native.
Yeah. Well, Seth, I'll ask this. Do you think the Minnesota has a positive hope though with like cyclical things? We've seen Guntersville get nuked. We've seen it go to 0 grass, and now it's like you can't throw without being around grass. And then maybe in 5-10 years, Guntersville won't have much grass in it again. And it does that. We see these other lakes doing that. Do you think that's the case for up north, or when it freezes off and it comes back that they're just too amped up on spraying too soon in the process? You only have a couple months of growing.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's been oversprayed, and I don't see anything happening that would ever bring it back. I mean, money talks. All the people that got the money don't want the grass. All the people that got the $5 million homes on Minnetonka, they wanted a sand beach swimming pool, and they're gonna get their way. So yeah, they've nuked it beyond recognition. I don't even. I mean, they'd have to like not spray out there for multiple years for it to ever really come back.
You could.
And the only good thing is the coontail's so deep, I don't think it can be treated effectively, because it doesn't surface. So that'll be the one saving grace, but that's not that much.
Just wait till someone
fun of a way to fish.
Wait till someone drops their iPhone in 25 feet and swims down to get it, and they touch some grass and they get scared, and then they'll report it, and then they'll send dive teams down to spray. That'll be the next thing. Kyle, what were you gonna say?
Might happen.
I was gonna say this is a dangerous question because I know who I'm asking it to. But if you could send a message to those $5 million homeowners, what would you tell them?
Oh, I mean, we're never gonna come to an agreement on that. It's just, it's public water. You know what I mean? It's the privatization of public land and waterways that drives me nuts more than anything. they think they own it because I'm sure they pay god awful amount of taxes to live on that lake. But at the end of the day, it's public property, and I just don't see. I don't even. I mean, I understand they don't want the grass in it, but I don't even know how you'd want to swim in something where they're dumping hundreds of thousands of gallons of jugs with skulls and crossbones on them, and the guy dumping it has to wear a hazmat suit. Why you would even want that in your lake?
I can't pee in my I can't pee in my local lake because it's the water source for Little Rock. Yet I can run my 250 Merc out there that might spill some oil if I didn't, make sure the seals are tight. So that's another phrase. Let's transition to something super happy that our fans listening online will love to hear. Even though that is we just need Gene Gillen on speed dial. When it comes up, we just add him to the call so he's aware. Obviously, he is aware, but. Seth, this month we have an Elite Series event, and it is at a place that you have dominated before. Yes, it was late in the season, so it was a different kind of bite. But what are your thoughts when you're taking your smallmouth knowledge across the country, what you've seen happen in Minnesota in July this year, to then how it translates to Michigan and then New York? It's not all the same up there. In fact, I've been so far up in Minnesota, I'm above Toronto, Canada. So there are some differences in the states. So if you've been at home fishing, how are you going to be able to prep yourself for a St. Clair event late July?
I mean, like I said, I think you're going to kind of have a little bit of everything going on. There'll still be some shallow fish, and deep's relative on St. Clair because you're kind of looking at I don't even know, minus the shipping canal, the deepest spot in the lakes, in the low 20s, 21, 22, 23 feet of water maybe. So they're going to be, nothing will be deeper than that. Obviously, they don't have the option. St. Clair doesn't fish like any lake I've ever smallmouth fished before because it's so featureless, and they just kind of roam. You're just basically fishing a giant flat, and you're really trying to get in that right kind of half square mile or 1 square mile where the bigger fish seem to be congregated. So I don't really have anything to get ready to help me prepare for that, but I've been there enough now. I kind of understand how it works, and I don't think you need many baits there. I don't know. I'll probably mess with the shallow ones a little bit, but it doesn't really even set up that well for that kind of deal. I'm probably going to focus more on the the 15 to 20 foot range, and it's going to be probably go out there with a drop shot, a Ned rig, and a crankbait, and it's probably all you'd really need. And I don't think that crankbait will be that good. That's kind of more of seems like August, September is when cranking's the best for smallies. So I think it'll, I could probably go there with 2 rods, a drop shot, and a Ned rig, and be just fine. It's just really about getting in the right area on St. Clair. The fish aren't terribly hard to catch. I mean, they are pressured, but when you get in the right area, it doesn't matter because there's so many of them. That lake has a tremendous population of smallmouths. It's just when the whole lake's fishable, there's 90% of the lake is gonna suck, because it's not like there's a bunch of 100-foot water and little humps and stuff they get on. It's just a giant flat. So you have miles and miles of water with nothing in it. Then you hit, it's usually half-mile square is kind of where it all goes down.
I do have a question about locations then. Not that you have to give out your game plan, but you've kind of seen it in multiple facets. You've seen the mouth of Huron have a couple leaders in it, and have a shot to win or had some top tens. You've seen the river play out a little bit in our most recent time there. You had the lake play out. We've seen Erie play as well. Last time we were here, I believe Canada was still off limits. So it made a fish real small. Metro was the main area. With it being not only Canada Open for St. Clair's fishing well, but you have Huron opportunity, you have Erie. Do you think that'll spread the field out a little bit? Because it used to be you couldn't win St. Clair staying on St. Clair, and then it flipped, and you had to stay on St. Clair to win. Now it's kind of, a couple years removed of that.
Yeah. It's kind of, we're at that stage in the cycle where it's wide open. I would say I could see it getting one out of Erie, Huron, the river, or the lake. I'm I'm for sure going to spend my first 2 days of practice on St. Clair. But if I can't get anything figured out by then, I might start exploring the river, or if it gets real windy one day or something like that. But I'm putting my eggs on the St. Clair basket. I don't want to get caught up spending half my day running the boat out to Erie and hoping it doesn't blow. St. Clair, no matter how bad it blows, you're still going to be able to get to your fish for the most part. So I'll probably stay in St. Clair the whole time. It's fishing well enough. You can obviously win out of it right now. But I think everything else is fishing good enough too. Because there were some years where St. Clair sucked. There were some years Erie sucked. But I think everything's kind of balanced out now where I think it'll spread the field out a little more and be a little less crowded.
Kind of transitioning off of that, obviously, like Ronnie said, we don't want to get too much into your game plan or give anything away, but we were actually having this conversation in the office the other day. When you factor in these big giant bodies of water that are obviously some of the best smallmouth fisheries in the world, it's a hard thing to fathom, because if you took some jabroni like me and put them on some of these lakes, I wouldn't even know where to start. Like, I wouldn't know, being serious, wouldn't know, I'd know what to look for on the map and just from, watching you guys, but it's a daunting thing trying to find fish in a lake that's, and like I said, it's not just St. Clair. I mean, all of them. For somebody that's making a trip maybe up north to smallmouth fish, like, what does your preparation look like? Like map study, trying to figure out certain areas. For somebody, like I said, that might not be as experienced, like what does that look like for you? And what would be your advice to somebody like that?
Yeah, and St. Clair's a weird one. I'd almost exclude that from this conversation because the lake is basically flat. You could throw the map away. You don't need one. I could
change your color
the
palette up so there's two colors, not just one.
Yeah, I can draw the lake map on a napkin. But most of the other lakes, smallmouths want a vantage point. You're going to look for humps and points, stuff like that, somewhere they can see really good, higher spots. And then they like rock and sand. That's kind of their main deal. Some lakes they will get in and around some grass, but the majority of the time it's, if you can find a sand bottom with isolated rocks on it, there's probably going to be smallmouth there if it's in the right depth for the time of year. But if you're just looking at a map, points and humps is kind of what you really need to look for to find smallmouth. As a general rule of thumb, like I said, St. Clair, you got to take that out the window because those don't exist. But yeah, most of the time you're just kind of looking for high spots, essentially, whether it's the tip of a point or a hump, or even shallow might be a microcosm, where it's just a little rise this much taller than everything else, but they like being on top. They want to be in a vantage point. They're like a good duck dog. He's gonna sit where he can see everything going on. He doesn't want to be hid in the back of the blind. Like, everything they do is on their eyes. This isn't a dirty water largemouth using his lateral line and whatnot and stuff like that. They're hawks, eagles, whatever you want to call them. They're going to sit in the highest spot where they can see the furthest they can see, and like a billy goat on top of a mountain. And that's where they want to feed. They're, like I said, they're pure visual feeders. A lot of that stuff is little micro deals that you don't really notice on a map, especially when you get shallow. But if you're out in the middle of the lake and it's all deep and there's a little tiny hump that comes way up, whether that's 30 foot below the surface or 5 foot below the surface, if it's a place he can sit up on and look all around and see everything, that's a good spot for a smallmouth to live.
For sure.
Yeah, Kyle, I've been there to St. Clair and floated around, and like, you see a fish on forward facing sonar and you catch one and you mark it on your map, and then you see some nice grass and you mark it, and then I just pray that there's either like a line and that I can drift that the next day, or that there's a triangle of, you could just say this area, like, I don't know, but that it is interesting how guys can be so consistent yet not know where their fish will be positioned day to day when they're out there. And we've obviously seen those schools that are just absolutely phenomenal, going back to your win there at the end of the 2019 season. And but Seth, asking a couple of those questions fans always ask, I gotta ask, what's your biggest smallmouth and where? And then what's your biggest 5 bass limit of all smallmouth? Do you have those off the top of your head?
Yeah, they're both Mille Lacs. I got a 7.2 out of Mille Lacs. and I don't know the exact number on the big bag, but I've definitely caught at least 2 bags over 31 out of Mille Lacs. I don't know the ounces, but those are my best smallmouth stuff. That's when the lake was peaking. That would have been about the time we went there the first time, around 15, 16. There's a lot of really big fish in that lake, and they're starting to come back now. Actually, that lake's getting really good again. So it kind of, got a bunch of pressure after that tournament, kind of started to go downhill, and now it's getting a lot less pressure, and it's getting really good again. It's been pretty fun. I've been up there a few times this year. It's been really good.
You'll have to after St. Clair, we've got a few weeks till the New York swing. Will you be back in Minnesota after St. Clair before you go back to New York?
Yep.
Because if so, I'm supposed to be in
absolutely.
Minnesota shooting something with another of your buddies up there at Mille Lacs. And if you want to come and hop in the boat, we can go catch some. Just let you know, like, I'm retired, so I'd love to get shown how to catch a few.
I was going to say, I love how Ronnie purged that question at the start, as if Seth wanted to come jump in the boat with you and catch fish.
It won't be my boat. I'll be in somebody else's boat, but I know that it's an open invitation between those two pros, so it's all good.
All right. Yeah, I'm in.
That'll be good. Kyle, do you have anything for Seth before we let him go, though?
So like I said, the one thing we always do on these, and we go almost have to play the hypothetical game with the largemouth, because I don't want to go, I don't want to play a small violin again and go through a sad segment of the podcast like we did when we talked about the grass fish. But if you're talking about northern smallmouth fishing, in the month of July, give me your top 3 baits you'd have to have. And then if you were, theoretically, let's just play the theoretical game, fishing for largemouth in the month of July. The theoretical part would be if there was grass. If not, just what would they be for fishing largemouth? So top 3 for smallmouth, top 3 for largemouth.
Okay. Smallmouth, drop shot, number 1. I'll throw a fighter fly in there for the shallow ones, and then probably a Ned rig. Those 3 probably my top 3. Then for largemouth, a lot of our fish out here get on rocks and stuff too, so you got some options. I'll go a stealth fighter jig, flipping in the grass. I'll go outcast tackle chicken, big hair jig for when they get out on the rocks, outside stuff. And then probably be another drop shot rig for outside edge, or you can even throw that in like the milfoil that you flip. It's really becoming a good cleanup bait for me. So that'd probably be my top 3. If I get a 4th one, it'd be a frog, but that don't play as much on our lakes really. That's kind of a river deal.
I gotcha. I will ask this question. The second time we went to Mille Lacs, Keith Combs won it, I believe, and he did super well winding a big football jig. Is that just a late fall or like a early winter, late fall deal, or is that just a good way to power fish some of those shoals and high spots with one single hook, and you can kind of present it multiple ways, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's a good way to catch them. It kind of goes, it's a lot like a Carolina rig too, football jig, whatever, hard head, a lot of stuff like that. That's a good way to catch smallmouths, especially, honestly, that's a really good way to catch them when they're being like super finicky and stuff. Like I noticed that last year, actually I've seen that quite a few times now, where it's, like when we were at Oahe last year, it was like, I was on a big school of them. I could see them on the live or whatever. And like, I kept like going to like lighter and smaller and lighter and smaller on my spinning rod, getting down to like little tiny baits and 6-pound line and little tiny hooks. And then the opposite of the spectrum ended up being the best bait you could throw. 20-pound line. I think I was throwing like a 1 ounce weight and speed craw type bait. And that ended up being the best deal. And I could see them all down there, and I started out Demiki rigging, and I catch a few on that, but I like kept trying to make my bait smaller and go to a lighter line, was having no success with that. And then like the exact opposite of that ended up being the best way to catch them. So I've seen that a few times now. Definitely kind of a midsummer thing, but sometimes when they're really hard to catch, you can do the exact opposite of what you'd think. Yeah, exactly. Bully them into biting. I like it.
Well, I'm going to bully you real quick. And the last question I'll ask is, you have to lock it in right now. Seth Feider, Lake Champlain. Are we going to see you mixed bag it, smallmouth only, or largemouth only this time? You've cussed both of them at the same week before. So which one are you cussing this time?
I don't think largemouth only is a possibility. I'll take that off the deck right now. Smallmouth only is definitely a possibility. That lake's getting that good with smallmouth, where you don't need largemouth to win. But
gotta show some love and catch one of them at least.
I can't leave them. I can't leave them alone. I'm gonna have to go mixed bag, and this time I'm gonna win.
Just catch one off a bow dock for us for live. You just got to catch one bow dock and fish.
Four big smallies each day in a 5-6 pound bucket, and hell, you win. Piece of cake.
Exactly. Hey, more times than not, you have a shot. Yeah, you are in the running every time. Kyler, you go with Seth, because I'm gonna let him go, because we're gonna have future podcasts where we can get into all of the questions I want to ask him now. We'll ask him later as well. I promise.
All good on my end, Seth. Enjoyed having you on. Obviously, way later than we should have.
Now we know.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see how it is.
But thanks for joining us, man.
Hell yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on, boys.
Awesome. Episode 135 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company, is in the books. Pat of the month for the month of July with our man Seth Feider. We'll see you in the next one.